Hi there, I'm Jen. This is Remembered Reads, and this was going to be a wrap-up, and then I got distracted while talking about one book. So I'm going to turn this into a discussion slash question that I'm asking. So the book that I started rambling about when I was trying to do this wrap-up was Keah Brown's The Secret Summer Promise. Keah Brown is the creator of the Disabled and Cute hashtag from a couple of years ago, and out of that she got a deal for her memoir, The Pretty One. I talked about that a couple of years ago. When that came out, she also has a children's picture book, which I haven't talked about yet, but that's cute. I will eventually. I did film some footage of a flip through for that. And this is her first young adult novel. So she's done a book for very young children, a book for an adult audience, and this. Now, this is a book with characters who are in their late teens, but frankly feel like they should be 12 or 13. Now that's not necessarily a problem. I think there are a lot of books that are really aimed at a middle grade audience that would have characters who are a bit older. And I think there is no problem with that, but this is definitely being sold and marketed as a young adult novel with the idea that there are teenagers reading this. And it is very odd tonally to be reading the conversations between characters who feel like they should be 12, but then they're driving cars and going to part-time jobs. The disconnect there is odd. And I haven't really decided how much of a flaw that is. As an adult person reading this, I feel like that's a major flaw, because I would look at, say, my niece who is in her late teens and my nephew who is 14, and I would think these kids were immature even if they were my nephew's age, and that they're supposed to be in their late teens does not feel right to me. But I wonder if readers in their early teens at least would feel that way. Like, I think actual teenage readers who are in their late teens would not relate to this. I think it feels too young. I think they would recognize that it feels too immature, especially because in this book we have a main character who has had a long-standing feud with her ex-best friend and currently is having a feud with her current sort of best friend, who she also has a crush on but is bitter because she's maybe dating a boy as well, and love triangle romance subplot, right? And all of the arguments between all of these girls and between the girl and the boy feel like 12-year-olds. But a socially immature 13-year-old might enjoy that. They might find that relatable, that these kids are supposed to be 17 and driving and having jobs, would maybe feel aspirational. So I don't know if that's a fair critique to make, because certainly there are books that are about older teenagers that I think feel like they're about older teenagers. I talked recently about Zoulfa Katouh's As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, which is about 18-year-olds in Syria that's set about 10 years ago. No, less than 10 years. That's set about like 8 or 9 years ago. And I think this is incredibly successful, but am I calling it incredibly successful because I think it crosses over with, say, a generic contemporary slash chick lit kind of topical chick lit, I guess? And I wasn't sure about that, so I was trying to think of other examples of young adult literature, of books that are clearly actually aimed at teenagers, because I think there are a lot of things that are labeled young adult for marketing purposes, but that are actually being sold for 20, 30, etc. something adults who just read within the category, within books that are marketed for that age range and aren't actually. So I was thinking then about H.N. Kahn's Wrong Side of the Court, which is a book that's set here in Toronto and is about kids in their teens who feel like kids in their teens, and I think is a book that, you know, reading it as an adult, it has some flaws that I don't think teenagers would care about, because it's not talking down to them in the way that I think this is. And what's harder with this book is that I don't think that it's trying to talk down to the audience intentionally. And it's challenging because I feel like this has the feel of a book where the author wanted to put in all the things that she wanted to see in a book when she was growing up, which I think is certainly fair. You see that. I think you see that in a lot of... So I can't really decide on how big of a flaw this is, because obviously you can write teenagers who sound like teenagers in a way that is maybe not 100% appealing for adults. It doesn't necessarily, because a book like this, which is a basketball drama, I don't think is going to cross over, or, you know, isn't going to be a crossover like this one is. But I think it still is respecting its audience for being kids in their late teens. But I don't know how fair it is to critique that. Like, I don't read this and get the impression that Keah Brown is looking to aim this at specifically 13-year-olds and not 17-year-olds. But I don't know how much of that comes down to the publisher. This could be a publisher marketing thing. There's more money in YA than there is in something that's borderline middle grade. I don't know how that plays out. And it's not just the characterization. The writing itself is often very juvenile. Now, I think some of this is I was disappointed because I like the goal, kind of. I think a lot of books are written with the idea of I want to answer a question that someone had, or I want to read the book that I didn't get to read as a child. I know the author of this one has said she wrote this because she went to a university exchange in Switzerland, and her classmates were like, oh yeah, so what's happening in Syria? And she was answering that question. I know the author of this has said that a lot of the kind of young adult sports novels that are aimed at teenage boys were very both US focused, but also weren't representative of like Toronto demographics, and he wanted to see something like that, and so that is in here. And this is clearly doing the same kind of thing, although this is one of these things where the main character, like the author, is black and has cerebral palsy and is bisexual and has a very ethnically and disability-wise diverse social circle, but everybody's rich, and I don't know, there's something weird about that too. And so I don't know, like I'm adding that because maybe because they're all rich, they're too rich to grow up. I don't know, does that explain why they act like 12-year-olds? I don't feel like it should. Because like this book deals with class as well, because it's set in one of the many neighborhoods in Toronto where you have public housing right next to, you know, the $3 million houses, and so the characters in this are dealing with that and how there are social differences between somebody whose family is very wealthy and someone whose family is definitely not, but not in a way that makes them sound like 12-year-olds, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. So I haven't decided how fair it is to complain about the fact that these 17-year-olds in this book sound like 12-year-olds, because I don't know if the author's trying to sell this for 13-year-olds and it's kind of aspirational, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if any of this made sense. If you have had similar thoughts about reading books for a younger audience and thinking, you know, who would I recommend this to? Because that's the question that I have with this. I'm always thinking, would I want to see this in a primary school library? Would I want to see it as a secondary school library? And I feel like the characters' life stages make this a little too advanced to have it in the primary school library, but it is just both the base writing style and the style of the dialogue make this feel like it should be written for a much younger audience. And so I don't know. Who would I recommend that to? I don't know. I think maybe in part it's frustrating because the character in this book is kind of aware of media tropes, and at one point even mentions that she doesn't get to see black, bisexual, disabled girls get to have their love triangle and romantic drama. And, you know, you never see characters like that, and if they check two of the boxes, they're probably going to die at the end. And it would be awesome if that book were I just thought, yeah, I want to read that too, but I want it to be good. It's not necessarily bad, except in the sense that I don't believe 17-year-olds having the arguments that these kids are having. So it is bad because it doesn't work from a characterization perspective, you know? I don't know. I'm not sure that this made sense, but I was rambling about it and what was going to be a wrap-up, so I thought I'll just do it as a separate video. If you've read that book, or if you've had similar thoughts about other books aimed at a younger audience, I would love to hear your thoughts about that. And yeah, that's it for now. Ciao.